Welcome back to Talking Europe. Well, this week, as representatives of 200 countries gathered for an annual climate change conference in Morocco, French President François Hollande called on the US to stick to the Paris Agreement on cutting carbon emissions. Also, European ministers agreed on a common defence force, but insist that it is not an EU army. And there was more tough words from the EU for Turkey. But Austria's call to end all talk of future EU membership for Turkey failed to get any backing. Also, Germany picked its next potential president, its current foreign minister. What does that mean for Merkel? Well, to tell us about that and everything else, we're joined by Rebecca Arms. You're a German MEP, Vice President of the Greens here in the European Parliament.
Co-President.
Co-President. So tell me, firstly, looking at the climate change conference taking place in Morocco, the goal is to lay out a roadmap for what was agreed in Paris, which was really a promise to want to change, if you like. Do you think that genuinely countries will actually be ready to put words and promises into action?
I hope so. And I'm working for this here in the European Parliament and also in international relations because Paris really was a breakthrough. So this idea to change the top-down process more into a bottom-up process and to base the strategy on national action plans, and then in the end also the signature finally together also with the United States. So it was a breakthrough, a huge success for French diplomacy. Now we see some dark clouds above Marrakesh, and it's not yet clear what Marrakesh and what the international process will deliver.
Well, you say there it's kind of coming down to national states to do more. And we did see Germany, really, their amount of renewable energy they use has been increased quite dramatically. However, it's still, something like 25% of their fuel relies on these coal factories. We have other EU states very heavily reliant on coal, like Poland. Almost 90% or more of its electricity comes from this source. It's an expensive thing to change. Do you think, how long do we need to give?
So I must say the experience in Germany is it's affordable to do it, and renewable energy can compete on the market. If not, it would have been out already again. So in Germany, we also push our government to do the decarbonization faster. We think they built up too much on coal since we decided to phase out nuclear. So we have enough scenarios to show that you can replace in carefully planned processes nuclear and coal in Germany. It's a process and we have to do it.
And will that be then national budgets that should deal with that, or would the EU also, look at helping member states?
So the EU puts also a very important frame because we have our common targets for renewables, for efficiency, and also for measures across the different sectors of our industry. So change is necessary, change is important, ambitious targets are important, and people must understand it's not to end industrial production, but it's to change our industrial production into a more sustainable and climate-friendly way.
And you say, as you say, there with all the new technology coming out,
but the technology is available. The question is always how we do it. Think about the car manufacturers. So electric cars are feasible. We have to decide.
But are they greener when you look from the start of the electric car right to the end in terms of recycling all the parts and the making?
They are yet not perfect, but we have to develop them, and we have to leave, for example, the dirty diesel and CO2 emitting cars behind in a process. And so to transform what we are doing in our industries right now in a more climate friendly, innovative perspective. So for me, it's for the Greens. I'm representing the Greens. It's about our future in Europe. It's also about the future of workers. So if you look to China, they will not import in the future dirty cars. So if we want to deliver for the Chinese market,
we saw that Volkswagen scandal not too long ago. It's coming
so
to
Volkswagen
mind.
is my region, so I'm really worried.
That's more rules need to be imposed as well on an EU level. I mean, that went.
We have
broke
to follow the rules. We have to make the companies to follow the rules. So if they don't do it for diesel cars, will they do it for climate targets?
You have to stimulate them. Now, one thing that we have seen, though, in the past 3 years, I believe, growth of the world's carbon emissions has remained static. Is that not progress?
So the huge pressure on Paris to get a breakthrough was due to the fact that everybody knew we are talking since decades on the need of combating global warming, but emissions, CO2 emissions were increasing. And so everybody who's now talking on climate targets for 2050 and being very ambitious till then. So the ambitions must start now, otherwise we will never make the ambitious targets for 2050.
Well, indeed, as world leaders gathered in Morocco, there was one man who who, though was not present himself, was overshadowing somewhat the talks. It was the US President-elect Donald Trump, a climate change denier who promises to bring coal mining and fossil fuels back to the US. Catherine Viette tells us a bit more about his view on climate change.
Will he or won't he honor the Paris Agreement? That's the question being asked at the United Nations annual climate conference underway in Marrakesh. On the campaign trail, Donald Trump famously called global warming a hoax and repeatedly threatened to cancel the Paris deal. Now that he's been elected the next president, many are worried he'll make good on his campaign promises. U.S. officials have sought to downplay concerns, saying the deal is bigger than any one head of state.
It's premature to speculate. The new administration may look at the commitment globally, at the interest globally in the issue, and decide how it can move forward in ways that are consistent with its own policies. We'll have to wait and see.
Some hints can be gleaned from the transition team Trump has already assembled. He's appointed Isabelle from the Competitive Enterprise Institute, a well-known climate change skeptic, to assist in setting the direction of the Environmental Protection Agency. As the world's second-largest emitter of greenhouse gases, many fear that if the U.S. pulls out of the accord, it will shatter the political goodwill built up over years of negotiations. While waiting for word from Washington, governments ranging from China to India, as well as the EU, have reaffirmed their commitment to the pact, with or without the United States.
Well, at that climate conference in Morocco, US Secretary General Ban Ki-moon said he was sure Trump would evaluate his campaign remarks and maybe change them, hoping he would make a good decision. Technically, though, he could rip up the Paris Agreement. He could decide he doesn't want anything to do with it.
So all signatures made by presidents or heads of governments, so if political change is happening, can always change. So fingers crossed that the United States not again develop from a driver of the international strategy to fight global warming to a burden. We saw it in former periods, but nobody can predict right now.
How are you feeling? Are you worried?
So when I'm facing again this denial of Trump and even the lies on why we have a strategy against global warming, I'm wondering how somebody like this can be so successful. It's the main question. So he's a question mark as such, as a person, to many things we have achieved and we find important.
Now, that election, of course, of Donald Trump in the US, a lot of people here in Brussels were looking at how it might change US-EU relations. German Chancellor Angela Merkel seemed to be the only one that I noted, at least, to put her pledge to work with Donald Trump in the conditional, as long as he manages to, share the same values and human rights and all of that. Is Germany the only one you think willing to stand up to the US?
I don't see Angela Merkel standing up against the United States, but I see her in her reactions, so friendly, but principled. And I think this is something I like very much. Maybe it's her third term, and she's better prepared to deal with growing challenges.
Indeed, it is her third term, and elections to be held next year in Germany. Already, though, firstly, a potential next president has been picked. I believe your current foreign minister, Frank-Walter Steinmeier. Now, he's a social and democrat. Replacing him from someone from Merkel's own party didn't seem to be possible, as in terms of president. Does that mean anything for Merkel's position in Germany?
So there are many speculations. So since the speculation period on the president, so the candidate by the coalition ended, so since that moment, we have the new speculations on who will follow Frank-Walter Steinmeier as Minister for Foreign Affairs. I must say, even sometimes having arguments with him, for example, on the best strategy towards Russia, I think he was a very good man in his position, and it will be difficult to replace him.
Now, you mentioned there Angela Merkel, in her third term. I believe the leader of the Greens, one of the leaders in Greens in Germany, said, hoped that she might consider a fourth term. And there's even increasing talk that there could be a coalition between the very business-friendly, if you like, CDU party of Angela Merkel and the environmentalist Green Party. So to be honest, also as a Green, I see not really an alternative growing in the CDU. Merkel is so not beloved by everybody, but she is truly respected by a majority, especially also in my party. And I think in difficult periods, somebody who is as principled as she is, also on the European issues, it's understandable that we think she should continue, but it's a decision of her party. Of course. And one thing, indeed, she was very strong to stand up and give Germany's position was on this refugee crisis, which the EU is still struggling very much to handle. However, in recent weeks, we seem to see from the outside a U-turn in the German position on this refugee crisis. There's a proposal to pick people up from boats in the Mediterranean, bring them back to third countries like Egypt and Tunisia, and have them processed there, kind of like the Australian system, it would appear. How do you see that? I mean, is that fair?
So I understand all the people who say we should really stop the smugglers. So those who are making big money by putting refugees, people in need, into boats in which you cannot survive the Mediterranean. On the other hand, I would say it would be completely wrong facing this global growing problem of refugees that we close our European borders for refugees. I'm very much in favor of organizing strong direct resettlement measures from those big centers where refugees are arriving in north of Africa or in Turkey, especially also in Turkey, and to fulfill our duties in this global crisis in an organized way. Really to end that the smugglers make their business and thousands are dying in the Mediterranean.
And in EU level, it seems that we're really failing to do that because we make decisions by a majority and then certain countries don't play a ball with that decision and there's no punishment.
There's a lot of blaming and shaming in the EU, especially against countries in the east of Europe. But overall, meanwhile, you can say which country is right now performing in an adequate way and up to its economic strengths or democratic development. And I think really, this is a global crisis. We have to do more against the reasons for this global flight. We have also to do more for refugees outside of the European Union because we will not be able to deal with everybody here. We will not solve the problems of Africa here, but we have to take on board more people. And so Ban Ki-moon, before he left, he asked us to take 500,000 a year in Europe. In the end, he said 500,000 of Syria for 2 years, and the Western world refused. This is a scandal.
In an EU of 500 million, one wonders. And when you look at the amount of people, having to camp out in Turkey, now this seems to be the EU solution, is to look to Turkey. However, current events in Turkey, people are wondering how much leeway to go. We had a call from Austria this week wanting to call off all possible membership talks with Turkey, but that didn't get any leeway. Do you think EU member states are not reacting to Turkey as they might, except because they need Turkey with this migrant question?
So I think the European member states are not in the pocket of Mr. Erdogan because there's the deal. They are not really free in a lot of on a lot of different levels towards Turkey. Because we have many interests in a stable and good development in Turkey, democratic development, and also because we are refusing to do proper and ambitious resettlement programs for refugees from Turkey, for example, to Europe.
So more the nations that should progress rather than just keep looking at those that aren't
Turkey,
moving forward.
it should not be forgotten that we have, as European Union, for our own security and stability, we have a huge interest in democratic Turkey, also as a democratic Islamic state in the region. Right now, it looks awfully, but we should not forget our overwhelming interest in our neighborhood.
Indeed. Finally, Ms. Harms, you're also on the EU-Ukraine delegation and ongoing meetings with Ukraine, notably because of that referendum, popular referendum held in the Netherlands, and the Netherlands still not able to ratify that association agreement with Ukraine that was agreed upon by all the other heads of state in the EU. Another case of one country holding up something that took years of negotiations and decisions.
And imagine what this means for the Ukrainians. So Trump elected, so now obviously looking to become the best friend of Mr. Putin. Ukrainians still, the war in the east, they see it continuing. No Minsk agreement not successful. They are fighting against corruption. They make progress. They deal with their own internal refugees, 1.5 million meanwhile. And they are asking, okay, you don't give us the association. We even don't get visa-free traveling into the EU. Do you really want us? And this is, and so I think we need them. Also, this country, as democratic state, is increasing our own security.
Ms. Harms, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thanks so much for your time. Thanks also to you at home for having watched. That brings us very rapidly already to the end of this edition of Talking Europe. See you next time.